Welcome back to a special edition of Football Weather. Galen Clavio and Matt Blaska joining you here. Might have a couple special guests joining us later as well. But it is CFP Week 3, and we're going to talk about the ratings when they come out. We're waiting for Michigan State, Kentucky to finish up. Looks like Michigan State's going to beat Kentucky, which I know will make many people in our audience happy. But Matt, good to see you. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's been a 48 hours since we chatted, but a lot has happened outside of the college football rankings. So we have a couple of minutes maybe to chat about those things, but certainly the rankings are going to be interesting to see what happens in the middle of this, in the middle part of the bracket.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we wait for those to pop up, we got some coaching search stuff we're going to look at. And I also, Matt, I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit. I almost feel like the college football playoff rankings are far less dramatic right now than they were at any point last year because there just aren't that many teams that are legitimate contenders. It's more about order, but even that doesn't feel like it's quite as dramatic. We'll get into that a little bit more as we talk through things. But it's quite a fascinating thing just to kind of wait and see what they're going to do with Alabama today, what they're going to do with Oklahoma, where they put Notre Dame in the mix. I mean, there are some interesting things there, but there's not a lot of existential threats right now to the teams that we've already got in the college football playoff, except for Texas. I would say they are probably dead at this point.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that on Sunday, whatever day it was. That getting blown out by Georgia was not what they needed to do. They needed to keep that game close for the A&M game to really matter. But to your point, it would seem like a lot of the games that we really need to focus on are probably a week and a half away. That would potentially see some new teams come into the bracket. But at this point, it seems pretty set on the top 8 at this point, or top 9, with Notre Dame kind of lingering. Oregon plays USC this week, so that's the one game that certainly will have some impact. Oklahoma does play Missouri, and it sounds like the Missouri might have their quarterback back, so that may be a little more interesting than we thought originally. But certainly, both of us have the same top 6, so we don't really see much there, and I don't see much changing at the earliest until championship weekend with that group. So it seems like we're really set, which is odd compared to last year where we had some flux on most of the bracket. It seemed like last year.
Let's bring a special guest and our good friend from the Back Home Network, Rhett Lewis, joining us. We got the rare triple box going on here on the show. Rhett, great to see you, buddy. How you doing tonight?
Hey, pal. Fantastic. This is the best. These are the best rankings of our lives. Like, no pressure. Like, there's no suspense. Like, this is great. It's almost like, yeah, we're just kind of in there up at the very top. Don't mind us. Let everybody else fight it out beyond number 2.
It's such a huge. I remember being so nervous coming into these shows last year, Rhett. I know you felt the same way. It's just like, are they going to have us in? Where are we at? And now it's like, oh, we're going to be second again. That's fine. And it's an interesting thing now to think about what's the lineup look like for Indiana. Sure. But what's so beneficial right now is you've played 11 games, you've got a bye, and now you could. And yes, granted, this is SEC, minnow week where they're just playing all the FCS teams. But it is nice to have everybody else having to play a week, and Indiana gets to step back and just kind of revel in what they've done up to this point.
Yeah. And yeah, you can kind of play that game, right? You can kind of look around and see where it's at. But like, I think at this point, the biggest question mark is, okay, let's look at, those first 4 buys, and how does the Big Ten championship game actually affect what happens with those buys, right? If Indiana and Ohio State go in as 1 and 2 into championship weekend, do they both come out regardless of outcome for either one as still one of the 4 buys? Yeah. I don't see how you can't if it's 1 and 2, right? And I don't at this point. I mean, I guess Michigan, could throw a little kink in the works there at the end. But at this point, to me, it's like even the loser of the Big Ten championship game still gets one of the buys, and it's still hard to forecast where this thing ends up.
Yeah, and I think it was a little more of a question, I think, before Alabama lost to Oklahoma, because you could make the argument, given what they'd done, and since apparently we're not counting the Florida State game against them ever.
Sure.
Like God forbid, we're but now they've lost another game, and they're either going to run the table and move themselves back up a bit or not. But when you've got a situation where Ohio State and Indiana, if they both go in at 12-0, A, I think they will both come out with byes, and B, it seems unlikely that the committee is going to set up so they would potentially meet in the semifinal. It would probably be a situation where they'd be 1-3 to avoid that rematch. And, since you wouldn't need to, you'd either have two SEC teams at the 2 and 4 levels, or maybe Texas Tech wins out the rest of the way and picks up the 4 seed. But I think I'd have a hard time seeing a scenario where either team, if they lost in the Big Ten title game, wouldn't get a bye when you consider what's underneath them at this point.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, pretty wholeheartedly at this point. And, I think we'll maybe get a better sense now of where this thing will stand with those teams, 5 through 12. And we've obviously had some movement on the 12 side with the group of 5 as well, and probably could a little bit more as we go forward. But Oregon's got an interesting final road to the college football playoff, right? I mean, they've got to go through a hot USC team this week, and then they finish with the rivalry game at Washington. I'm just thinking on a Big Ten perspective here. I think I don't know that that's a given. I think Oregon is probably going to win those last 2 games, but is there a team from the Big Ten that comes up beyond? Does Michigan make a run? But ultimately, if they run into Ohio State at the end, a 3-loss Michigan's not going to make it in. Yeah. Is it going to be a fight between and then obviously if it's a 3-loss USC, they beat Michigan, so that's out. I think that 4th team from the Big Ten is kind of where I'm kind of intrigued as to how that's going to come through.
I mean, USC, and you got a chance to call their game this week against Iowa. I've been impressed with how they're playing lately. I think they have to beat Oregon to be in the conversation. Right. But I do think, if Oregon loses that game to USC and then beats Washington,
probably still in.
They're probably still in. And that's really the only scenario, because I agree with you. I don't see how Michigan gets in ahead of USC because they lost to them head-to-head, and they're not as impressive statistically as Oregon at this point.
Yeah, I think the only way that Michigan gets in is is at this point, they beat Michigan. I mean, they beat Ohio State and then hope that Oregon, beats USC. And then they've got a leg up there in the win-loss record. To me, that's or some craziness ensues in the final 2 weeks in the games that we're not talking about. But ultimately, I think that's kind of where you would expect it to come from. But this one's kind of interesting. Obviously, when you think about the 2 teams at the very top of the rankings, going into the season, Penn State and Texas, nowhere to be found, in this top 12 when it comes out tonight.
Well, Matt, you and I were talking about this. 5 of the top 10 in the AP to start the season are not going to be in the playoff.
Yeah, let's keep doing that preseason poll, though. Let's keep doing it, Matt. Don't you think?
Let's hammer it home, right? We have Clemson, LSU. I forget, was the other team? I can't remember. Miami's the other team, I guess. So the one team that's playing well, but
kind of, right.
But to your point you were just making, unfortunately there could be a huge clump of 10-2 teams that even if Michigan did win out or USC went out or went 10-2, there's going to be an issue here with Vanderbilt goes 10-2, Miami's 10-2, Notre Dame's 10-2. Well, eventually someone's got to be left out. So it's going to be really come parsing down to schedule strength and strength of record and every metric possible. So it's looking more challenging to get a 4th team in for the Big Ten if things would really have to break right for some losses here.
Yeah, ultimately, one of the big question marks coming into today, and what I'm most curious about with this ranking is what order does the committee put Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama in? Because obviously Oklahoma just beat Alabama. And the AP poll dropped Alabama all the way down to, what are they, 9th or 10th? They're 9th. Yeah. But the committee also significantly ranked Notre Dame ahead of Miami to avoid the question of, well, wait, didn't Miami beat Notre Dame head-to-head?
Right.
So they almost have to have a buffer there. And I do wonder if perhaps Alabama becomes that buffer between Notre Dame and Miami so they don't have to answer that question when they're actually dealing with the ratings.
Yeah, that certainly makes some sense. Just kind of looking at where that thing ended up. Man, it's so tough to kind of get a grip on where the committee is going with some of those, kind of question marks with teams that have similar records and somewhat similar resumes. And then you throw in the head-to-heads. And I just don't know how you can't, really dive in on the head-to-heads. Like, I just don't know how you can ignore them. So, to me, that's the real trump card there. God, what a win for Oklahoma this past week. I'll be curious to see where they end up after going into Tuscaloosa and taking care of Alabama. But that's a good one. Then Texas Tech, obviously, at another Texas Tech, BYU, Georgia, and Ole Miss, all as one-loss teams. I wonder what the committee does with Oregon too at this point. Is there any movement there?
It's a weird one because ultimately Oregon doesn't have a great win on their resume other than the win at Iowa, which, while we know the quality of that win, Iowa's not. I mean, they might be ranked in the lower ranges of the CFP committee ranking, but that's not a premier win by any means.
What's also interesting. The game I have this week, guys, coming up is Illinois at Wisconsin, and while I think it's a stretch at this point, I think there could be a conversation, especially depending on, if there's some carnage in the SEC down the stretch, just as there was a year ago. Like, do we start considering some 3-loss teams here, or are there enough 2 losses to kind of buoy this thing into the 12?
No, it's a good question. We had a question on Instagram if a 1-loss BYU would make it over a 3-loss Big Ten team or any team. Yeah. And I do think that there's some questions with all of that. And this is where, ultimately, my problem with the College Football Playoff Committee is not a whole lot different than my problems with the College Basketball Tournament Committee, which is that they just arbitrarily apply certain criteria to certain teams and not others. Like with some, it's overall record, and then others, it's the metrics, and then others, it's, well, what were your good wins? And, the others, well, you don't have a bad loss. And then others, it's, the eye test. And it's like, well, like, give us some consistency, guys. Like, help us out in trying to. And I realize it's a tough job, but it ends up being very confused because there may be a 3-loss team that's better than a 1-loss BYU. Will we actually see that rewarded, or will we not? I don't know. That's going to be.
Well, shoot. I mean, go back to last year. I mean, we all know that conversation, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, right.
What a difference a year makes.
We would agree they got it right that time, though, right? So
yes, yes, we would. Yes, we would.
Rhett, I know we got you for limited time, but one of the questions we had, it was a good one from Sam Newcomb. Winner of the Big Ten championship is going to the Rose Bowl, no question. Do we think the Orange Bowl is the most likely destination for the loser?
Orange Bowl, which is also the site of the national championship game, right?
It is,
yes. Yeah. I think that's probable. Would be the other options would be what? Fiesta.
So the quarter,
sugar and cotton.
Sugar and cotton. That's right.
For the quarters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they would probably prefer to stick an SEC team in the sugar. But yeah, I think that's probably the most that makes the most sense. So probably that would be the loser. The loser of the Big Ten championship game ends up going to South Florida, where maybe they get a leg up on that last game of the year and trying to figure out that scenario. But I think that makes the most sense.
Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No, I'll say I think that makes a lot of sense just because, as you mentioned, the SEC, all the SEC teams in contention are Ole Miss, Georgia, and Alabama for that spot, and then A&M would play in probably the Cotton Bowl most likely, and then one of the other free schools would probably pick or maybe they won't pick, but I think the SEC has the time with the Sugar Bowl, so that would make the most sense there. Sure. So I think the Big Ten loser is most likely going to end up in the Orange Bowl.
Hey, you know what's interesting, by the way, just to kind of backtrack on that conversation we're having about a 3-loss team. Iowa probably had a legitimate conversation, like a legitimate argument, if not for the loss this weekend, considering the way in which they lost to the ranked teams in which they lost to. That one, man, had some legs to it as a 3-loss team if they went into SC and beat SC. But obviously, that is not a conversation point anymore. yeah, like the Tennessee thing, I can't imagine we get into Tennessee at all.
I don't even think they should be ranked.
I don't either.
Saying like who they've beaten literally nobody.
I would put Illinois ahead of them at this point. With some of the wins that they have had. So yeah, this is just such a weird, disconnected feeling from these rankings. It's just because it's just like, yeah. Here we are. I mean, like, there's literally no suspense as to where Indiana is going to be. Just a matter of how we can slot things in beyond. It's pretty wild.
I was a little concerned last week with the commentary about there being a vigorous debate between Indiana and Texas A&M.
That's true. That's true. There was that. Yeah.
But I think any chance of that maintaining was squashed with the performance they put up in the first half at home against South Carolina. So
correct. And that was certainly watched and seen, and so I would imagine that we don't see that very much. So Texas out, Alabama. Do we think? Well, how far do we think Alabama falls?
I think they fall behind Notre Dame.
So you think that's the buffer?
Yeah. I think that's the buffer. Yeah,
I had them at 8. I actually had them above Notre Dame, but
above Notre Dame.
Yeah, my projection coming in is what I thought the committee would do was Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Georgia as the top 4.
Definitely.
And then Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Oregon
at 7,
Oklahoma at 8, Notre Dame at 9, Alabama 10, and then Georgia Tech as the ACC rep at 11.
Yeah.
Even though they'll say Miami for reasons I cannot fathom. Just could do the tiebreakers in the ACC, and then James Madison is the G5 rep.
Right. Wow. Is Coach Chesney going to be there at JMU to see them through the playoff? We could have 2 playoff teams without their coaches.
Between that and Lane Kiffin,
Yeah.
Yeah. The Chesney thing's interesting. Where I'm hearing, I mean, both UCLA and Penn State had a lot of smoke with Chesney today on social media. So I'm curious where he lands.
Quick one on that front. Before I jump out of here, you know Pat Kraft pretty well, right, Galen? You've run into him plenty of times. Yeah.
I did my doctorate with him.
There you go. Is there a person on this earth that is more stylistically, culturally, philosophically aligned with Pat Kraft than Pat Fitzgerald?
No. I mean, even right. Not a bit. Down to the Chicago thing. Pat's from Libertyville originally.
That's right.
Okay, so we got
Illinois in.
Illinois
top 25.
Arizona State, Tulane, Houston, Mizzou, and Illinois all jump into the
Illinois basically took Iowa's spot from a week ago at 21.
That's helpful to Indiana. That's helpful to Indiana. Then Tennessee, bafflingly at 20.
Wow, up 3 spots.
For what? They didn't play anybody.
Falling upward. My God. Virginia at 19, Michigan 18. Texas dropped 7 spots to 17th. Goodbye, Texas.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then Georgia Tech at 16.
Ooh, that's tough for a 9.
So Tulane's the spot then. Tulane's the G5 spot.
Yep. Are they leading their conference right now?
I think they're in the mix, but I'm not sure.
Is John Summerall going to be there?
We've exchanged one for another.
I mean, seriously.
Oh my goodness.
That's where we're at.
I gotta do some tiebreaker stuff with the
American here.
American, yeah. Tulane's still got Temple and Charlotte the rest of the way. And right now, ECU and North Texas would be the top 2 in the American.
Really?
USC up to 15, so they jumped 2 spots.
Yeah.
Which is that's actually 2 spots lower than what I had them in my projections, Matt. I had them at 13.
Yep. I think I had 14, so close.
Boy, that's going to be interesting if it's a Vanderbilt up at 14.
So Vanderbilt at 14, which means Miami is probably 13.
Yeah. Wow. Yep.
Maybe. Let's see.
Miami's at 13.
Miami at 13. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so they're closing in on Notre Dame. If Notre Dame is in that 9 or 10 range, that's okay.
Huh.
Wow.
All right, boys. I'm sorry, I got to run,
okay,
but it's nice to know what the top 2 will look like.
Absolutely. Rhett, thank you for joining us, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Rhett.
All right?
You got it, guys. Take it easy.
All right.
Yeah.
Rhett Lewis from the Big Red Carpet here on the Back Home Network, and we appreciate him joining the show. And we're going to continue on with the rankings here. There were a ton of questions in the chat. We'll get to those here a little bit later on. And hello to all the Instagram folks watching. We're trying to do a stream here on Instagram simultaneous. Okay, Utah at 12.
Okay.
Which is where I had them, so that makes some sense. They stay behind BYU in this process.
Yep. Okay. So this makes sense. Yeah, I think this is what I had. I had BYU Utah as well. Yep.
Yeah, so now the question becomes, and this is where this next three is where I'm really fascinated to see how it goes down. What order do they have Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma?
Alabama 10.
So Alabama's at 10. So Alabama drops 6 spots and does indeed serve as the buffer that I predicted that they would.
You were right. Yep. You're right. Yep. I made my switch late. I just couldn't trust the committee, so I put them at 9.
So this makes Bama's game against Auburn very, very important.
Yes.
Not just in terms of winning the game. They certainly can't lose it, but they might need a few style points in that game as well.
Yep. So you would think this is Notre Dame here, right?
That would be my guess.
And then Oregon.
And yes, as was pointed out in the chat, Bama is the last at large in this setup. Notre Dame at 9, which is where I thought they'd be, and this is where that they would be on the road.
Yep, they're going to Oregon right now, I would assume.
Or would they go to Oklahoma?
I guess, yeah. It depends how far they moved Oklahoma up. They're really trying to squeeze this out because they only have 20 minutes for this basketball game.
Who's playing the late game? I didn't even see.
Duke, Kansas, right?
This is how football brained I've been. So it is Oklahoma at 8.
Yeah,
so,
Oklahoma at 8.
So that would be Oklahoma hosting Notre Dame in the first round of the CFP, with the winner facing the 1 seed, which at this point we can assume would be Ohio State. Woo.
And then 7-10's Oregon against Bama.
That would be what I would think, unless it's Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Waiting for the graphic. You're
riveting.
You're like 2 seconds ahead of me. It's Oregon. All right. So that would be Oregon hosting Alabama, and it would be Oklahoma hosting Notre Dame.
Man, those are some great matchups.
They are.
That's great. Okay, so then the top 6
is in some order: OSU, Indiana, A&M, Georgia, Texas Tech, and Ole Miss.
It would seem the only intrigues 5 and 6. Okay, Ole Miss. Yep. So from there, I can't imagine Georgia's 5, but I guess they could be.
So that would put Ole Miss in a position where they would be hosting Georgia Tech, even though in the rankings they will say that they would be hosting Miami. But again, as good as Miami looked, they are not in a good position to get into the ACC title game, and they would have to win the ACC in order to get an at-large spot given these rankings. Okay, yes. Texas Tech at 5, which we would have expected.
Yep. Is there any intrigue here with Georgia popping A&M or no?
I mean, Georgia's played a much tougher schedule. They have 1 loss by 3 to Alabama. There's an argument, not a strong one, but an argument that they have been more impressive than Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
A&M's lone win of note outside of so Georgia's 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So. And so nothing's going to change then because A&M would have been the last one, I guess.
Right.
You can't if they reward A&M for a 1-point win against South Carolina. I have some real questions.
We riot at that point.
Yeah. They're going so fast. They're like, okay, there's nothing else here to really talk about.
Yeah. There we go. Indiana and Ohio State at the top. So that would mean obviously Ohio. Now I doubt this will be the order. Although I do think there's a fascinating argument to be made. What happens if A&M loses to Texas, and you have a 1-loss team and a 2-loss team in the SEC title game? Because at that point, I believe it'd be A&M and Alabama.
Is that the final scenario if that happens?
Let me double check.
Okay. Yeah.
In that scenario, if let's get the SEC up here. If Texas beats A&M and everything else stays the same, I'm sorry, it'd be Alabama, Georgia at that point. Which
Okay.
that'd be a fascinating scenario. Now I could see. Well, at that point though, you'd only have one SEC team in that top 4. So I don't think Indiana would stay at 2 or Ohio State would stay at 2 if they lost that. But I don't know. How would you feel about Indiana potentially hosting the winner of Oregon, or not hosting, potentially playing the winner of Oregon, Alabama in the second round? You've beaten one of those teams already, and the other team, Alabama, just hasn't looked that impressive statistically for large portions of the season.
It would be a heck of a measuring stick for the Hoosiers. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
Certainly, whoever they play, but if it's Alabama, certainly there's going to be a lot around DeBoer coming to play IU and all. There's more than just the game in that aspect, but certainly one of the biggest brands in the sport playing, the upstart here in IU would be really interesting.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to really know how that's all going to play out at this point because there's just a couple weeks here. But I think your scenario of A&M losing certainly opens up the door that probably Georgia does not want the door to be open for that. They don't want to play in that. They don't want to play in that game. So yeah. They're big fans of A&M. Big fans of A&M, you would think.
Although, if that scenario, in either scenario, now we have a really fascinating case of Alabama's in the playoff right now. If they're in the SEC title game and they lose again, what happens? Do they get bumped for somebody else?
I mean, again, it's a different committee, but the precedent made the precedent last year with SMU of not bumping them after. I know it was only 2 losses, but they didn't bump them out because they've had to play the extra game.
Well, but that, as you mentioned, that was a 2-loss team.
Yeah.
You'd have potentially a 1-loss BYU. You'd have a 2-loss Miami, who beat the team that Alabama lost to at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I venture to say they would not knock Bama out for playing the extra game. That's just my gut feeling right now. But if BYU went in and beat Texas A&M, then you have a different conversation because Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Because you assume both those teams then would certainly be in. You're not going to knock Texas Tech from 3 to out. I can't imagine that would happen, right? If we're applying the same metric of losing a conference championship game, but then that last team is Alabama, you have to bump them out. That would be the scenario at least, right?
That I would think so. Let's first of all, I think it's hilarious they've got a new committee chair. Matt Rhodes on. We gotta get into that later. Yeah,
I had to say, I'm like, who is this guy? I'm like, oh yeah, the guy got replaced.
That's right. That's amazing. Let's hit some questions.
Okay.
What does Miami's path look like to the last at-large? So I think it's a good question. Essentially, I think the pathway is as follows. There aren't a lot of pathways to it, but it would be Alabama either losing to Auburn or playing poorly in the Auburn game but winning, and then turning around and losing in the SEC championship if they're there. Yeah. That's got to be the first domino that falls. You would also probably need BYU at this point to lose to Cincinnati,
or lose a championship game, right?
So now wait a minute. Are you going to leap? Are you going to have Miami leap BYU if BYU gets into the Big 12 title game and loses, but not have the same penalty apply to Alabama?
Yeah. No. Yeah. There's probably not then there, right? So they probably wouldn't jump them at that point because Miami wouldn't have another game. So so they're not going to jump them. I guess probably USC beating Oregon, maybe.
Well, so there is
going to be enough.
If Oregon lost 2 games, they would fall out of the CFP.
Yeah, they're out.
Would they lose? Would they be bounced out of the CFP though if they just lost to USC and not to Washington? I think is an open question because you look at Oregon's record. And, look, I've been critical of A&M. I've been critical of Ole Miss. I'll also be critical of Oregon. What the hell's their best win right now? I guess it's Iowa at Iowa, who's not in the rankings.
Who's unranked now. Yeah. Oregon's got a really tough – if they lose this week, I don't see a path. Yeah. I think they have to win this week.
Yeah. Obviously Notre Dame could lose one of their 2 final games. That seems exceedingly unlikely given that they're playing Syracuse and Stanford. Ole Miss has got 2
Sure.
games remaining, and unless the bizarre scenario happens where A&M and Alabama both lose during rivalry week, that's the only scenario where Ole Miss makes the SEC title game. But at Ole Miss, like losing in the SEC title game is an interesting scenario because, I mean, they may also lose their coach, and there is precedent with the CFP committee, not in this era, but in a previous era. I mean, if you're going to drop Florida State out of the playoff because they're missing their quarterback, do you drop a team out because their coach is gone?
That would be a new one. I don't think they would go that far. Maybe I don't know, but I sorry, go ahead. I was actually thinking of the Miami thing too. Both now that Louisville's unranked, both their losses are to unranked teams.
Yeah, although there's a non-zero chance that if SMU wins their last 2 and gets into the ACC title game, that they could be ranked, which would make one of those teams ranked.
Yes. Yep.
Bryce asks, "What if Oregon beats USC but loses to Washington?" I think they'd still be in because you'd have a win over. That's a top 20 win. That's a really good win for you for Oregon against USC, which would cover up whatever happened in that Washington game. I could see their seeding falling some. I don't think that they would get knocked out. Question or comment here from B-Ball 6023. Pretty sure that avoid IU Oregon rematch, even if that means dropping IU to 4 with a loss at Ohio State. But the problem is then you're setting up an Ohio State Indiana rematch in the semifinal. I honestly, at this point, if you're going to have 3 or 4 teams from the Big Ten and 4 teams from the SEC, you're going to get a rematch at some point early on in the process. So
I don't think that's going to stop. I mean, they had Oregon, Ohio State second round last year. I think they would avoid the Ohio State Indiana semifinal match before they would worry about that one. That's because that's something like if they're both 12-0, I can see them making the, if it's both SEC teams and both Big Ten, 1-3, 2-4, just to keep that separated.
Greg says Miami is in and so is Notre Dame. Miami is not in. I know it said that they're in, but this is an important point. I want everybody.
It's really important, and it's hard to really. I know it's hard to grasp, but Miami's not going to be in as they're not in. They have to be in at large.
And here's why. Right now in the ACC standings, Miami is 4-2 in conference. There are 4 teams ahead of them with only 1 loss in the ACC: Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pitt, and SMU. SMU has a tiebreaker head-to-head over Miami, which means that even if obviously they finish tied with SMU because SMU lost another game, first of all, everybody else would have to lose 2 games in order to Miami to be in that spot.
Conversation.
It's not likely to happen. So what is most likely to happen is that Georgia Tech will play
Virginia or SMU.
There's a chance it could be Pitt. But Pitt plays Miami. Miami's either going to knock Pitt out of it or Pitt's going to knock Miami completely out of it. One of those 2 things will happen coming up very shortly. But, Georgia Tech and Virginia seem like the favorites right now to play in the ACC title game. So even though they're showing Miami as being in, they're not in. And they have a really rough road to even get into consideration at this point.
Right. And Pitt does play Georgia Tech this week. So Georgia Tech, if they win, they're 7-1. That's 1 team in. And then it comes down to Virginia and SMU. If either of those teams finish 7-1, Miami is likely out. It's going to take a lot of things happening around them. Their only real route is an at large. So I know it's hard to. It's a pain that they do it this way, but they really are not the 11 seed. They're really out.
Yeah. Comment from SW Indiana 10. If Iowa wins out and gets back in the top 25, IU has the best resume, and it's not close. I mean, I'm sure people would quibble with that. But look, I think if Iowa finishes up strong, they're 6-4, but they've got Michigan State and then they're at Nebraska. They're both winnable games. Finishing 8-4 probably brings them up into the bottom half of the standings. It might, or the rankings, but I still think Indiana's got a good resume. Right now, the best win in college football is one of 3 games. It's either Indiana winning at Oregon, Oklahoma winning at Alabama, or Alabama winning at Georgia. There's not really – are there any other contenders for best win of the season beyond those 3?
Those are the 3, yeah. Those are the 3 road wins, right? Those are the 3 biggest wins of the year.
Yeah, and Greg's like, so they seed them on the reveal, but they aren't in. Such a weird graphic. I agree. It is a weird graphic, but it's because they put the leading – they put the leading team in
Right.
the committee rankings in the auto spot because they're not doing tiebreakers in this process. I don't pretend to understand it. It's misleading, but that's just how they're choosing to do it. Sam Corrin asks, does Michigan get in if they win out? I don't think that they do.
I think it's gonna be really tough. There's a lot of 10-2 teams, and they're gonna have to jump a lot of teams and hope for a lot of chaos. I know that would be the best win of the year. I mean, I don't think that's at that point be argued because they've been number one all year, Ohio State, right? At this point,
You think even though it's a home game?
Yeah, I just don't think Michigan's good.
Well, I think it'd be the most unexpected win.
Yeah,
I just don't know if it'd be the best win.
It's right, but like if they'd be beating the number one team in the country, which hasn't happened this year, right? We haven't had the number one team. I guess Penn State or Texas had to lose at some
right?
Yeah, I guess Texas maybe would never run. Forget what I just said.
Sorry, we'll get our interns to edit that out. It's fine.
I forgot Clemson, Ohio State, or Penn State were even in the conversation this year. But you're right. It probably be the best win, but it certainly would be the last look, right? And so his scenario would be Michigan could play for the Big Ten championship. Now that's a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Michigan's path, they have to beat Maryland, and then they got to beat Ohio State. So they'd be 8-1 and 10-2, and wouldn't be in the Big Ten championship unless Oregon beat USC and then lost to Washington. Like that's the scenario for Michigan to get in to the. And then at that point, Michigan. Now there's a question: if that happens and Michigan loses to Indiana at that point in the Big Ten championship game, do they get in? That's an open question, this is where like we can't say for sure. But I think Michigan right now, what were they, 16th in the ranking? No, they were. They were 18th in the AP poll.
Yeah. I'm trying to go back in here. Yeah,
it's a lot of moving up there trying to get themselves.
They're 18. Yeah,
18. Yeah. So, but as Steve or whoever or Michigan missing in that scenario would be great internet. It would be tremendous internet. Absolutely, they might withdraw from the Big Ten at that point, which would be tremendous.
And that'd be really interesting too. Like how far would Ohio State fall because they would have potentially no top 20. I guess Illinois, right? Because Texas could drop out and lose to A&M.
Well, this is the question. What is Ohio State's best win? Is it better than Oregon? I mean, at this point, I always put a little more weight in road wins than home wins. Some would argue, it's Texas. But like Texas in Ohio Stadium, I don't know that that's that great of a win. So it's either Ohio State's best win is at Illinois, I would say, at this point. Is that better than Oregon winning at Iowa, or better than Oregon in the scenario we're talking about winning at home versus USC? Maybe not either at this point,
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, they're not going to drop Ohio State out of the bracket, but certainly, I mean, they could legitimately have no top 25 wins. I mean, I guess they should creep into the top 20, you would think. I mean, at some point, I can't believe they went up 5 spots after beating Maryland or whatever they weren't even ranked after beating Maryland, but they did. But anyway, it just causes more conversation what happens then. But I find it really hard to believe Ohio State's going to lose, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think this Michigan team is as well equipped as last year's Michigan team was, but obviously stranger things have happened, so looking at a few other questions that were passed along from folks, I think the questions right now are really, okay, here's a good comment to support my Michigan point. Michigan had 2 guys last year that were top 8 in the NFL draft. This year, don't know of anyone that good. I mean, and obviously they've got a freshman quarterback. Their passing game has looked non-functional, essentially. They had 5 turnovers against Northwestern. They lost, I think, their number 2 running back after having already lost their number 1. I mean, it's a much different scenario. So I'm not even counting it as a possibility in my head right now that Michigan is going to beat Ohio State. And I know they've won 4 in a row. I still don't think it's a real possibility this year.
I think it's one of those things. They did it last year. Like Ohio State just did not play. They didn't play to their strengths. If you remember that game at all, Michigan just dominated the game, like in terms of just holding on to the ball, and they wouldn't let. I feel like they've been preparing for this game, regardless of what they say, almost all season because they've had other games, because they are ready to beat Michigan this year. I mean, I said it last year, I thought it was going to be a blowout. I really believe it this year.
Yeah. There was a comment from earlier, and it's a really good comment. Oklahoma could lose to Mizzou this Saturday. That would be another massive SEC shakeup. Like, Oklahoma can't afford another loss at this stage. And I don't know if you saw, but the news is that they think Bo Pribula is going to
he's going to play.
Which is pretty wild, given that it seemed like he might be out for the rest of the season. Oklahoma's got Mizzou at home and LSU at home, and they've had 2 emotional road wins in a row. It is not. I mean, this is an Oklahoma team that lost earlier this year to a Texas team with a non-functional offense. And yes, John Mateer was stymied at that point by injury, but it's not unheard of that Oklahoma could have an emotional letdown in that game. That is a route for Miami or somebody else being able to sneak back in and pick up an at-large bid, because if Oklahoma gets knocked out, someone's got to take that spot.
Right. So I'm curious. We've talked about BYU. Utah is at 12. Where do they have a path outside of the conference championship round?
The fact that they're 12th is really fascinating. Utah looks very good in the power rankings. I mean, they're up there in FPI, they're up there in S&P Plus. Their last 2 games are Kansas State at home and at Kansas. They should win both of those games, I would think, with relative ease. They got blown out by Texas Tech earlier on in the year, and then they lost by 3 at BYU. Now, their problem is they don't have a ranked win. And so that's like, again, but this is where the committee, I just don't understand why they've decided on the rankings that they've decided on. Like, why is Utah with that resume ahead of Miami when Miami, whatever you want to say about the loss to Louisville by 3 or the loss at SMU, who's still in the hunt for the ACC, Miami has a 3-point win against Notre Dame, and they blew out Florida, who's not good, obviously, but Florida beat Texas, so there's something there. Like, at least Miami has a ranked win, whereas Utah does not have a ranked win. That one's always confused me as to why they went the way that they went to.
It seems like it's really, that one's metric heavy, right? And no bad losses. Their 2 losses are to 2 teams in the top 11. And then Miami, they're being held back by their losses. I mean, that's the only way you can frame that at this point. And we're obviously not in the room, but it just seems like they're trying to create a big enough gap between Notre Dame and Miami so they don't have to talk about it. Does it not feel like that?
It does. It completely feels that way. It's very odd, and I don't get it. Now, Father Kavanaugh brings up a good point. The ACC is relentlessly pushing Miami harder than Georgia Tech or Virginia, because I really do think, and we were texting earlier. This is where Jim Phillips feels way out of his depth. I think they realize they don't have an at-large candidate, but they're trying desperately to make it seem like they have an at-large candidate.
All the tweets they keep sending out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And look, I do think there is a question mark about why the rankings are the way that they are. What gives Notre Dame the ranking that they have is how impressive they've looked and how good their power metrics are compared to Miami and other teams that are in this mix. But again, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. It's such an inconsistent set of criteria that are getting applied that and we do this in basketball all the time, where it's like, why is this team ranked ahead of this team when the criteria that you're applying to that matchup is different than the criteria you're applying to this other matchup of teams where the criteria is the opposite. It drives you nuts if you pay attention to it enough,
Yeah. And I mean, it's just, you're right. There's just too much inconsistency with why one team is over the other. Because I went back and forth between Alabama and Notre Dame, and to me, like, is Alabama probably has the better wins, the better everything else. Notre Dame do they have any top 25 wins left? I guess USC, right? I mean, that's
they've got USC now. Yes.
Yeah, they've had USC, so that's the only one they have, and I know it was at home. But outside that, they really don't have a lot of meat on the bone. They've blown everybody out, but they're very metric friendly. Where the other teams, for example, like Utah's blown everybody out, also metric friendly. Where Miami is getting penalized for losing 2 games to bad teams, where the metrics are favorable as well, but not as good, right? And so it just seems like they at some point they're just looking at the loss column instead of looking maybe at the actual resume at points. But the Big 12 is going to be interesting. Have you ran the other scenario too? If BYU loses to Cincinnati, does Utah control at that point then to go to the championship?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if BYU loses to Cincinnati and everything else stays the same, no, this is okay. This is where it gets a little bit bizarre. If you assume that the favorites win every game except Cincinnati beats BYU this weekend, the Big 12 title game is Texas Tech, Arizona State.
Wow.
Because a 3-way tie between Arizona State, BYU, and Utah. Arizona State would have the better record versus common conference opponents. They would be 3-1 or 3-0, whereas BYU and Utah would be 2-1. That would be a wild scenario. So you would, if you're Utah, I think you'd run a route for Arizona, but in that case, BYU still has your tiebreaker. So there may not be a route for Utah to even get into the Big 12 title game at this point.
Yeah, it must be 2 BYU losses. I don't know what their last game is, but yeah. So
BYU's got UCF. I don't think they're losing to UCF.
Yeah. So it seems like just from our conversation, Utah has a really heavy lift to even have a shot to get in as an at-large, or even I guess the automatic too.
Yeah, I mean I don't see looking at that, and that's why we didn't spend a lot of time on Utah earlier. I just don't see much of a pathway there. Now, the one other potential scenario that would be worth looking at, and let me do one quick switch over here, and put Arizona State back in. There is the potential of a 4-way tie at the top of the Big 12, or for the second place, between Arizona State, BYU, Utah, and Houston. But that would still result in Arizona State going to the Big 12 title game because they would win the 4-way tiebreaker. A 3-way tiebreaker between BYU, Utah, and Houston would result in BYU going.
Yeah, so there must be some other weird route that because I think they said they're still in the mix in something I read, but it seems like it takes something down in the bottom of the bracket that's going to change the common opponent or something like that.
Sam notes Notre Dame resume similar to IU last year, but with one more loss. True. Notre Dame with better power numbers, and Notre Dame has a better win than Indiana had last year. That USC win, they do get credit for that. But it is a similar resume in terms of there's not a real not a top line there, and the extra loss kind of offsets the better win. Question: are you guys going to go in depth in Heisman talks before the Big Ten championship, or no point until then? At this point, I don't think there's it feels like the voters are going to wait until that game. I think everybody else is likely out of the equation. I think Marcel Reed is not really a competitor. I think Ty Simpson lost his candidacy by losing to Oklahoma. I think it'll largely come down to what Julian Sand does versus Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah.
I also think it's going to be an interesting question of how many votes does Jeremiah Love get? Because he's been getting some buzz lately, I've heard. I am curious to see if there's voters who would go that direction. Does that split the vote in some way?
It's also important to note that there was 4,000 voters for the Heisman. It's not that many, but it's a lot. And so the Midwest has 3 candidates. Jeremiah Love as the third possible person from this region. So not saying they're going to split votes, but that certainly could come into play where it may be a different scenario in the different regions of the country. It's hard to really say until we get to that point, but it does feel like a 2-man final, unless Marcel Reed has a big game against Texas. That would maybe be the last, and a big SEC championship. Those things. The Heisman has changed to show me your last result and how you played. So that's where we're headed at this point.
A question: does Utah belong in over Vandy? From Justin. I think it all depends on whether Vandy, if they win their last 2, which would include winning at Tennessee and maybe finally unranking Tennessee, then I would say Vandy probably deserves the nod there over Utah, just because they would have one better win than Utah has. What do you think?
Yeah, you're probably right, but then does Vanderbilt have a path? It's outside of the crazy scenarios. Are they just too far back that they could because USC's path is they can have a big win and they would probably jump Vanderbilt. I think USC over Oregon win would be better than Vanderbilt over Tennessee, right? Just based on these rankings.
Yeah.
I'm not going to include Georgia Tech because they would if they beat Georgia, they're going to move ahead of them.
Yeah.
Texas is done. Michigan needs to beat Ohio State, but we think they're too far back, and Virginia's only round is probably the ACC championship, and Tennessee's done. So that's so if we're looking at this, Georgia Tech's probably the lowest team that could probably still get an at-large. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. No, if they beat Georgia, it completely changes the equation. No question.
Yeah. But the question, I think Vanderbilt's in a really precarious spot. They're going to need help all the way around and actually get some upsets.
Yeah, they would need Oklahoma to lose. They would need Oregon to lose twice, and they'd need something improbable to happen to Alabama, like losing to Auburn. Big B Brown actually came up with the scenario that I was looking for. West Virginia beats Texas Tech, then Utah can play for the Big 12 title. That's true.
The scenario?
That is the scenario, because if you calculate that scenario,
that a 5-way tie?
It is a holy war part 2. If BYU beats Cincinnati and they're 8-1, it would be BYU against Utah, because Utah at that point would have the tiebreaker over the 3 other teams they'd be tied with at that point. Now, if Cincinnati beats BYU, then Utah can't go, because you have a 5-way tie at the top, but it becomes Arizona State, Texas Tech again in the championship game. So the only route in that is for Utah not to be in a tie with BYU, but West Virginia to beat Texas Tech. Thank you. I appreciate you looking that up for us. That's great.
That is great. And that also that would knock out Texas Tech at that point. I can't imagine a loss West Virginia is going to hold well when they're not even in the championship game at that point. That would really knock them out. I
don't know that it would. I mean, they wouldn't be in the championship game, but they'd have 2 losses, but they're 5th. You think they'd drop all the way? I mean, it'd be a pretty bad loss. Maybe you're right. I don't know.
They just dropped Bama for a 2-point home loss, right, for 6 spots. I'm looking at. I don't know West Virginia's record off the top of my head. I can't imagine
they're. I mean, if they won that game, they'd be 3-6 in conference. That tells you something. Like, they're not making the bowl. Here's a great comment. The real question: will Georgia Tech say they don't care if they lose by 100 because they're focused on ACC play? That's good. I like that a lot.
Well, I mean, but for Georgia Tech, it's really important because they could still get in that large. Like, so if they win this week, because they play Pitt, they could knock Pitt out this week, and then play Georgia, and they win both of those. I mean, they're going to be in a good spot for an at-large. Again, 11-1. I can't imagine that's not going to hold some weight.
Yeah. What do you make of the comments on how they'll weight the conference championship game? Surprised they're treating it the same as other games.
I didn't hear the comments. Did you?
What were the comments? We didn't hear. I mean, what they did last year was they essentially said if you were in your conference championship, you were going to make it, with one exception, I think, which was the Big 12. But that was a situation where all those teams were on the outside looking in. And I do think there's a question about, well, what if Clemson had lost that game to SMU?
You're right.
What would have happened then? It just turned out that they ended up winning the game on a last-second field goal, and SMU was ranked high enough that they were able to get in. But like, this is where, again, we don't have enough evidence or precedent to say for sure what the committee will do. And the committee's down 2 members right now. So it's even like
they picked one up. They picked one up.
Oh, did they?
The Utah AD's on the committee.
So they picked a guy up who's the AD of a school that's right at the edge. That's brilliant. Could they have just couldn't they have gotten like the Purdue AD? He's not doing anything right now.
So listen, I forget what podcast to listen to, but he was picked because he was on the committee when the Pac-12 dissolved, so he didn't finish his term.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the comment.
All right, go ahead.
They said they would treat the conference championship games as another data point, i.e. the 13th data point. The comment implied they'd treat the conference championship games the same as regular season games. Okay.
So it's different than last year then, I guess, in a way. So I just want to follow up. So this is interesting because it's curious how Oregon's kind of not really moved very much. The chairperson, Hunter Yurachek, says the Oregon is still getting credit for beating Penn State, even though the Nittany Lions fell off this season. So they're still getting credit. That's exactly. I'm reading what Nicole Auerbach said.
Does that make any sense to you?
So does you get credit then too, or is that?
When does credit stop at that point? That's a little bit strange.
Yeah, and then so here's another one. He's saying ND and Miami aren't even in the same pool right now because Miami's 2 unranked losses, so the head-to-head tiebreaker hasn't come up yet.
Okay.
So I'm just reading. I'm just giving you. But it is curious because we did. I think there's something to be said about Oregon breaking Penn State, but to give it that much weight is pretty interesting.
Can we also talk about how Alabama has an unranked loss?
Yeah, has that come up yet? I'm trying to see.
Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Is anybody going to bring that up at some point?
it just keeps getting like glossed over. I would have thought it'd been brought up more now because they have lost. They've fallen to the last team in now.
I mean, I'm just take them and BYU. BYU has one less loss than Alabama, and it was to a team that is 5th. So yeah, and yes, I'm with you that Alabama has better wins, but if that's what's keeping Miami out of the conversation with Notre Dame, why does it not apply to Alabama and BYU or Alabama and Utah?
I'm with you. As we keep circling these teams, you're like, yeah, why is it over here, not over there?
And it's not even. And the thing is, it's not even that Alabama's like some overwhelming statistical darling. I mean, Alabama's 6th in FPI. You know who's 7th? Utah.
Jeez.
I mean, it's a very odd. This is where I really get frustrated with the way that this process works, because it is so logically inconsistent. I mean, if you want to get even deeper, Alabama's 11th in S&P plus, Utah's 8th. I'm not a fan of BYU because they're 17th in S&P plus, but it's just like these are the logical inconsistencies that I wish other people in media who were interviewing these people, maybe on a major network that covers sports primarily, would ask them, rather than just letting them make these statements without further interrogation. That drives me nuts.
I'm with you. I think all we want is consistency and explanation of why you did what you did, right? Like, and I think it's like, show your work, just show us. So like, we'll still have debate and argument about these things, but at least we'll say, okay, this is why they did what they did. I can understand that point. And maybe we won't agree, but at least we would know.
At least we
right?
know. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating stuff as always. Well, Matt, any final thoughts? We're almost at the hour mark. We should probably wrap up here. But any final thoughts from you before we do so?
No, I was just looking to see if anything else from Nicole was coming up, because she's been transcribing basically. No, I think this is kind of what we expected. I know the 7 through 10 was where we thought there would be some movement, and certainly that's how it played out. I know you're less surprised than I am that Alabama's the last team in, but it does seem like that we have a pretty solid 6 that are going to be in the playoff. And then after that, there's going to be movement. And then the 11th and 12th spot, I don't know who the G5 person is going to. I mean, right now it's Tulane, and then the ACC is going to be in that spot. And we have some really fun games left for both those leagues that are going to play out. So a lot of fun football still to go. We'll get some more answers this weekend, but it's now really time that we're really getting into the meat and potatoes of the season.
Yeah, no, 100%. It'll be fun to see what happens. Not a lot likely to happen this week. We talked about it. It's a pretty quiet week. This is one last comment here. First of all, yes, I know, Lorenzo, I'm saying S&P plus wrong. I know it's SP plus. Honestly, it sounds weird when you say SP plus. SP. So I've made a conscious decision to say it slightly wrong, since everybody knows what I'm talking about anyway, but I acknowledge my error.
It's also in the stock market, so we're all good.
Yeah. This is interesting. The committee chair also said they were treating championship games the same as previous years before explaining it as different, then started obviously sweating.
This is his first day.
I feel so bad for these guys sometimes, because they're clearly not ready to answer questions in these venues. This happens in basketball too. Every time they call the committee chair in after they bring them in and have them explain what they did, and they can't explain it. It's like, that's rough. I'm sorry, but it is what it is at this point. But no.
So they finally mentioned Alabama. Okay, so when you break down Alabama, Notre Dame has 2 losses in the top 13. Alabama's 2-point loss to Oklahoma, and a loss to Florida State, who is now 5-5. They lost 31-17, but we're down 24-7 in that game. And Alabama had less than 100 yards rushing. That was his response to Bama being ranked 10th. Behind.
They knocked them because they didn't have 100 yards rushing?
I'm just reading what they said. What he said.
That's
new metric.
As much as I'm a big fan of transparency, it might be better just to be quiet on this, guys.
Maybe don't Just mention getting blown up by Florida State because everyone watched the game. Wasn't close, but you don't got to mention the rushing yards. I know they had a lot of. I didn't have many, but that's not something you want to mention.
Now I want to go back and look at everybody's rushing totals and see, who did what. That's that man. I can't believe that was. I can't believe that was that was an actual data point.
So they'll probably he cited a game like South Carolina where Bama struggled to run the ball.
You know who had less than 100 yards rushing in a game? Notre Dame against Miami in the first game of the season. They had 93 yards and averaged 3.32 yards a carry.
It's less than 100 as well.
Anyway, all right, that'll wrap it up.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks to everybody for joining us, and we'll catch you folks on the flip side. We'll be back with football weather on Sunday as we recap what happened in the week of college football. For Matt, I'm Galen.
See you
Catch you
guys.
folks on the flip side.